Hello, people. This week I read A Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess, I believe. Fantastic book. Actually, really good. The writing is just supreme throughout the whole thing. Um, what I will say to start is that there are heavy subjects, right? I guess trigger warning things. There's violence in this book. There is rapes in this book. There are unpleasant things that happen. So if that's an issue for you, clearly avoid this book. It's odd in a weird way. I guess I'll explain as I go. I'm like, why would something with this in it, with these subject matters, be, quote, enjoyable, right? And it's the way it's presented. What our author picks is to go first person through a guy's perspective named Alex. That's our main character. That's the person saying everything in here. Now, again, when you can take the harder subjects, I guess, are easier to deal with through this person's point of view. Because from his point of view, they are what they are. If violence is fun to him, then, it sort of becomes fun to you in a weird way. And that wouldn't sound like a thing that can work, but it kind of does work in this book. Our author will use long block paragraphs. Sometimes I think because it's one person speaking, because it's first person, he doesn't have the normal dialogue cuts that you would typically have in a book. So it'll just be such and such guy says something and it's right in line with everything else that's spoken. So you start to ingest these things as a reader and half digest them before you have a break sort of in the page to think about what it is you're actually reading, right? In a normal book, you'd get this block, the paragraph, and you're like, oh, that was horrible. You don't really have room for that because of the speed and the quality of the writing. It just keeps funneling into your head, right? And then it's sort of after the fact, you start to, digest what's happening. And so in that sense, you're absorbing things the way our character Alex absorbs them, which I think is some of the point our author's trying to make in the violence, etc., etc. So it has a purpose. It isn't gratuitous, right? It isn't there for its sake, but it is there. And if it's an issue for you, avoid this book. He has a kind of a difficult jargon to read as well. Some of the words might not mean anything to you. But again, if you sort of sit back and allow it to happen, I think your brain starts to pick up on way more than you'll realize. They had no license for selling liquor, but there was no law yet against prodding some of the new vetch, which they used to put into the old Moloko. So you could peat it with Velocet or Synthomex or Dincrom or one or two other Vechets, which would give you a nice quiet horror show 15 minutes admiring Bog and all his holy angels and saints in your left shoe with light bursting all over your mozg. Right? Again, I didn't read some of those words right. Sue me. But it's that kind of a quick, I guess, British slang back in the day. And you start to feel what it means. You feel that it means some kind of drugs, kids getting high. He says Bog and all his holy angels and saints all in caps because this kid has attitude. like you wouldn't believe. There's getting high, there's violence, but it's, again, that's drug use from his perspective. He talks a lot about God, a lot about, even within his realm, how just being zoned out on drugs isn't, what do you say, gentlemanlike. It's not proper, but it's fine to just, if you need an edge to do your, do a bit of the ultra violence, his words, not mine. What is it? Nor to do the ultra violent on some shivering, starry, gray-eyed pista in a shop and go smacking off all the till's guts. But as they say, money isn't everything. I mean, it's just gloriously written the whole time. He talks in speech to other people with the they, the thous, the whilst, what have you, this kind of thing. Almost Shakespearean. He sees, Alex now, sees himself a certain way. He sees himself as a certain level. And he does revel in the violence. They literally go down the street towards a library and find a guy who likes to read. And I'm like, I like to read. This is not good. It kind of hit me kind of close to home. But that's a side issue. He doesn't just like insta hit him. And again, what the book does so well, which other people who write first person seem to miss, is there'll be sort of a line of action. One small thing that's happening. Here's a guy we want to beat up. And then his brain, Alex's, does these great offshoots constantly of him narrating in his mind what he thinks about books, what he thinks about these old gray-haired people who think they're better than you, or whatever it is he's thinking. He lets his brain go, because your brain does that sometimes. His especially. It shoots off in all these different directions. He's almost ADD almost, where it doesn't seem like he can stick to a single issue, but he's not ADD. So he doesn't just want to beat the guy up. He plays it up a bit. He acts like he likes reading books. He's looking over it. Then one of them acts like they found something just, horrific in this book, and that this is a bad guy for even having the book. Then they start beating him up, just flat out. He says, "Then out comes the blood, my brothers, real beautiful." I mean, he enjoys violence. But he also isn't mindless. What is this? He buys a bunch of old ladies at a convenience store food and booze. Right? He literally spends his money on them so they say nice things about him. And for an alibi. He knows things could get him in trouble. But then he also is like, if we spend the money, it gives us a reason to go get more. And by get more, he means rob a place. Which is what they literally then go around the corner, rob a place, then come back. So when the cops come, these old ladies are like, no, these are nice young men and they were here the whole time. Right? So it's not just violence. It's like an amusement ride of violence for him. These things are fun for these people. They get into gang wars with knives, with chains, kicking, punching, stabbing, the whole works. Again, fairly violent. And I know it was written in Britain. Anthony Burgess is British, I believe. And I felt like this was some semi-commentary on, where is it? I heard it somewhere where somebody's like, a society needs to find something for its fighting age males to do. And that if they don't, it's a sign that, things could go bad. And I wonder if this is a commentary for him on that, on Britain's state of that at the time he wrote this. Because for the longest time, right, Britain had its empire. You have things that need to be protected all over the world. And you can grab these young men at 15, at 16, and Send them to India for 10 years or 5 years, and they come back less agitated, more mature, settle in better with some structure, right? In a crude way to say. But I think we went through a modern era of England where we didn't have this. They lost their empire. And I think it developed a kind of hooliganism, right? Now, I feel like American sports do a lot to negate this same hooliganism. I feel like we play a lot, we support a lot of sports. I mean, I don't know how many thousands of kids will go through high school playing some sport or another. And I feel like that does a good job venting this energy. But I feel like that's what he was bringing up. It doesn't mean it's less of a vicious fight. They then steal a car and go beat up a rider. And I'm like, oh man. This is just too close to home. And the writer is a writer of A Clockwork Orange. And I just love when the name of the thing is in the thing, right? When a TV show has the episode is, two purple penguins, and someone in the episode says, look, two purple penguins. I love the sort of fun of that. I don't know if there's a word for it, but it always amuses me when that happens. Some of the lines in the book. This is a book in a book now. The attempt to impose upon man, a creature of growth and capable of sweetness, to ooze juicily at the last round the bearded lips of God, to attempt to impose, I say, laws and conditions appropriate to a mechanical creation. Against this I raise my sword pen. He's a very, and you see this a lot, where you get like a pretentious writer. Not me. Maybe. Am I pretentious? No, I'm just full of it. Full of myself. No, but you'll get like an intellectual type writer who loves to just dabble in politics. And they get a kind of a know-it-allness about themselves. Right? And that they know best, and here's how the world should work, etc., without ever having, gone to these different parts of the world. To live with these people, to ask if they even want it changed. You get this sort of sense from this writer. And that then he gets horribly attacked by these kids, right? So that he's against the punishments that they want to instill. And then is met by the thing that punishment's trying to get rid of. Right? It's visited right into his house. It doesn't affect our Alex. And like I said, it doesn't affect you as the reader in the sense of an attack because you're seeing it through his perspective. You kind of absorb it the way he would. Which maybe, again, is part of the point our author's trying to make. And he wrote this, I want to say in the 50s, but I'm not exactly sure. Maybe in the 60s. In any case, he wrote it back in the day. And it's not like the world's gotten less violent since then. Is he trying to say, that as a society, our modern society maybe enjoys violence too much? Is he trying to say, this is how it passes over us, that it can just happen without a blinking of the eye? You wonder about these questions, again, after the fact, because during you're taking it in. He then just goes home and listens to classical music. Oh, it was wonder of wonders. And then a bird like rarest spun heaven metal, or like silvery wine flowing in a spaceship, gravity all nonsense now, came the violin solo above all the other strings, and these strings were like a cage of silk around my bed. Again, the kid isn't stupid. The kid appreciates complex things deep, and he names some of the classical music. I haven't listened to it, but he names various classical musics. He's very into it. His parents go off to work. His mom says, I've got to be off myself now, which was true. There being this law for everyone not a child, nor with child, nor ill, to go out rabbiting. And I'm like, one, it's a funny line, right? But two, it's also, again, I've heard, if you dabble in politics in various places, you hear people bring this up where this opposition to work as a concept, right? I've heard this mentioned before where people say, why should we have to work? Why should I have to get a paycheck? Etc., etc. Now, on the face of it, it doesn't make much sense because who's going to give you stuff for free, right? But that trickles into other things, right? They'll say, well, medicine should be free. You shouldn't have to pay to save your life. And then the other side says, well, who's going to pay for the advancements that save lives? It's a back and forth, right? But it's what it really is a sort of a side thinking a certain way. And I feel like we've had this sort of argument since even the Greeks. This weird connection we have that some people feel it's not as human an existence to have to work for someone else to make money when you could just do a thing that generates something for other people. And then if we all generate for others, right, this communistic thinking. And you see it mentioned here. And again, our boy just mentions it in passing. But I feel like it's sort of a question thrown out by the author. It stuck to me a little. Now, at some point, he gets annoyed at Dim. He gets annoyed at Dim and cuts Dim. And tries to establish some control over his little band of crazies. They don't like it, but they maneuver through it. Later, then they break into another house to do more of the ultra-violent. Right? I laugh because it's kind of funny. But I feel like he hits an old lady and then starts like getting attacked by cats. Or there's some issue with pets. In any case, he runs to the front door, right? Because it's too much for him at the moment. He needs his boys to come in and help him. He slipped in through a window. So he runs to the door, opens it, and he's like, everyone run, the cops are coming. But it's Dim sitting. The other guys are already running, but Dim's there. Gives him the old, what for on the forehead. He said with his Uzi. Which I don't know if it's one of those little whacker things they use in the old movies. Little lead. I don't know if it's that or if like the chain's wrapped around his hand. I'm not exactly sure. He does use a chain. Old Dim. In any case, he punches him, knocks him out, and leaves him there. And of course, the cops get him. Take him to jail. And he screams all kind of, I'm innocent, this and that. He knows enough not to just admit to everything. He's not a dumb criminal. The cops beat him while questioning him. The old lady ended up dying from the shock or the damage or whatever it is. So he says he's a murderer at 15. Again, and it doesn't read like this. And then part 2 comes. It's a big block, part 2. Gets its own page. Big stopgap. Part 2 being his time in jail. You see it in great flashes almost, where he takes to religion, and there's a boozed out priest, which again you can't help but see as a commentary on religion a little bit. The religious people never call him by his name. He's always his number. I forget what his prison number is. 66712 or whatever it is. Again, that's another commentary on why wouldn't a religion call a prisoner by his name? You know what I mean? But they're very quick to just call him his number. Then a big wig comes. The government cannot be concerned any longer with outmoded penological theories. Cram criminals together and see what happens. You get concentrated criminality, crime in the midst of punishment. Soon we may be needing all our prison space for political offenders. It says this just in passing. He only sort of cares about some new technique that could get him out of prison sooner. But you see, just there in the background, the politics of the world churning around this prison. Here's a person who did bad things. He's raped people. He murdered an old lady. He beat up multiple other random people for no reason. Violence for violence sake. He should be in prison. Right? And yet here come outside influences to use the image of him for their political gain. And again, you can't help but ask which is worse. I don't know. I'll leave that up to you. They start him on a reclamation treatment. Reclamation treatment being they strap him down and make him watch the things that he used to do. Breakings and enterings, vicious assaults of various kinds, various war footage, he says, of viciousness that happens in war. But the way he takes it is that they're real. So even the sort of sexual assaults he takes as real. Real enough, at least. And then again, you have to wonder, because he says this is the good and the government making these things. You're like, what kind of a government, what kind of an entity, an institution is producing this material, this vicious material, and that it being produced is okay because it's through this lens of science? Does that make wrong right? Right? Question. He doesn't have an answer. Our boy Alex doesn't ask it. It's like our author's asking it of us tangentially, right? Just asking the question, because the truth is that our institutions do these sorts of things sometimes. And then a lot of the films become, sort of the heavy torture from war, which can be as vicious as anything or worse. And that's purely state sanctioned, right? We have heroic movies, films about war heroes, etc., etc. And then how we uphold, soldiers as doing a good thing. Not saying that they don't. But again, our author's asking this question. And then you can't help but see one question next to the next, right? So here's a guy who did bad things. And as the reader, you will clearly agree, none of the things that he did was bad. But then his war, way worse. It can be celebrated sometimes by nations. And way worse things happen. Was it avoidable? Was this avoidable? Right? Is this society's fault? The rampant crime we have? It's the same as our fault as it is the war. We didn't find a better way to avoid either, right? We start to ask these sort of heavier questions, and our author's not giving us answers. He's just, through this narration, sort of cultivating these questions, which I think is fantastic. Now, the films he watches, they drug him the crap up and make him watch these horrible things, and every time he sees them, he feels worse and worse and worse. Until, it's sort of, what do we say, such brainwashing that if he even thinks about doing something violent to someone, he'll feel sick as all get out. And they say, boom, he's cured. And they release him. Again, you're releasing someone who clearly belongs in prison. If we're going to have prisons, they got to be made for people like this, if anyone. But instead, what do we want to do? What did it say? We want to clear out the prisons of criminals to put in political rivals. And you would think that at some point this would go out of fashion, but you look throughout history, and jailing political rivals has yet to go out of fashion. I mean, it's there. It's there to be looked at. And what does it say? What does it say that we'll use these things for political gain rather than defending the citizenry? And then what does it say about the citizenry that they're allowing it? Who can say? Part 3, he goes back home. He goes back home, but, his spot's been taken because his parents thought he'd be in jail a lot longer. All his stuff got sold. All his big speakers and vinyl. All his things were sold to take care of the dead lady's cats, which is just kind of funny to me. Not that she died, but like they're just cats. What are we doing? But, you know, again, sometime in places where we shouldn't have law. Should we have laws that punish cruelty to animals more than cruelty to people? You know what I mean? I don't know. You tell me. People will have different opinions on both sides. Those are fun arguments to have. He goes to he can't hear classical music anymore, which to him is the worst punishment of all, because he loved it so much. But they tied the classical music just randomly to all of the horror films they showed him. So that anytime he hears it, he wants to, upchuck, but can't upchuck. And he's like, you know what? My parents don't want me. I can't listen to classical music. I might as well just try and kill myself. So he goes to the library to try and look for books on how to do this. Well, at the library, the old guy he beat up is there. And him and all the old guys try and grab him. And, they keep saying, let's kill him for what he did. Again, another commentary. These are just old guys. He said clearly that he's gone to prison, that he's reformed. But they don't want to hear it. They don't care. Vigilantism never works out well, I don't think. No. You got to have it detached to work best, the judicial system, I would say. But that it says something about old guys trying to kill a kid. Not a kid anymore. He's young. He's a young guy. But they're just weak. They're too old and weak to actually damage them. But that doesn't stop them from trying. The cops come and clear it up. And then the cops end up being Billy Boy, his nemesis, and Dim are now police officers. And you just can't put two things together better than that. There's been a lot of talk now, and I'm assuming in the future when this is watched, however many years later, they'll have the issue then of police brutality in some form or another. And two sides of the same coin, one arguing you shouldn't do the crime, the other arguing it's out of hand, etc., etc. But in the middle of this, we have two goons, two people who were just straight criminals in their youth, now with the full authority of police officers. It just I think our author's trying to say, at the least, however you feel about the argument, you should have maybe better psychological tests for who's an officer, right? I don't know. But it's sitting there. They end up beating him up and leaving him out in the countryside. He then starts trying to walk back home, knocks on a door for, to get out of the rain. The door ends up being the author of A Clockwork Orange. And he's still at it to his, in his defense, even though he got criminalized, beaten. His wife ends up dying because she couldn't get over the shock of the attacks. Even though he took all of this negative, he's still more determined than ever to fight this injustice. But then you also kind of get the sense that he kind of knew who it was that walked back into his house. He's being nice to him, but he's also being weird about it, right? Him and his other conspirator types come, and they're discussing how to use him as a symbol for their cause. The cause of liberty. Always the cause of liberty. And he ends up, I think, upstairs trying to sleep, and classical music just starts bellowing out. And of course it makes him feel terrible. And he just can't escape it. And he tries to commit suicide. Again, another trigger warning I guess I should have put earlier in. I jumped, oh my brothers, and fell on the sidewalk hard, but I did not snuff it. Oh no. If I had snuffed it, I would not be here to write what I have written. He wakes up in the hospital, and it's just a series of people who keep coming. his parents come and now they're back to okay with him. We assume now because it has some fame to it, right? Which, again, people don't act right around fame. We've seen it once. You've seen it a million times. And if you haven't seen it, just watch. You'll in the course of your life, notice someone who fame gets and who that person unravels because of it. Politicians of various types come. And as he's recovering, they somehow cleanse them of this brainwashing. They cleanse the chemicals out, or whatever they did. So he's back to his old vicious self. He can daydream about violence again. He's the good old Alex again. And again, because he's happy about it, you're kind of happy about it. But you're like, this doesn't seem right at all. The writer of A Clockwork Orange gets arrested for he's a subversive writer, they say, and that he tried to kill him. They have evidence that he intended to knife him, right? Which he was attacked by this guy. A little revenge is that horrible? Also, all the people who were running the study, right? They ran the big study, and he was the prize to say, look, we've cured criminality. And people got elected because of that cure. But then they see him, that he tried to commit suicide, that this writer tried to stab him, and the public's, again, aghast. And so now all those people are out. And then the new people coming in are happy that he's won for their cause. The other people's political futures are dead. And I'm like, this kid just can kill anything. Kid's a killer. Right? And then we end with, I think the author makes a point early in the book, I think a preface of saying, he knows, he's aware of how popular the film is and that what it's done for sales and the inescapability of the written word books becoming movies, and that's how the society ingests, etc., etc. So he's aware of the fame of Kubrick's movie. He doesn't hate it, like a certain Stephen King who hates The Shining, I think. But he's aware, and that he says the film ends at a certain spot. And I believe the American version of the book used to end at a certain spot. But the British one had an extra chapter, and he had a point for the number of chapters and all this and that. And so this one ends with Alex with the new gang, seemingly doing the same things, drinking the milk plus, whatever drug he wants, with a new gang where he's now the oldest. But that he, in a moment, sort of he's tired of it. He's over it. And so he sends his crew away, and he's walking by himself, and then he meets his other friend. Forget the other guy's name. In any case, that guy grew up. It's been 2 or 3 years, so he's grown up and gotten married, and he's just a normal guy now. And he remembers his friend. They reminisce a little about the wild times they used to have. And then Alex starts to sort of daydream about having a kid and propping his feet up by a fire, and that he says, "Oh, this must be me maturing." And, it must be something old God's trying to do, or something to this effect. Where he doesn't quite get it, but he's going to go with it. And I guess you assume that he's changed his evil ways. But then it starts to make me think about how much should I be trusting this Alex? How much should I trust all of this narration? Was it as vicious as he says? What were these just horror murders? Or was it just, youthful crimes that he overinflated in his mind, right? Because psychopaths don't stop being a psychopath. Not that I know of. And his other guy is friendly enough with him. So you wonder if this was just his young way of overblowing it? It's hard to say. It all could be just also like he's going to fake having a family and just be horrible on the side. But I like that we're not exactly sure. And that's how it ends, with him walking off, thinking about his future. And then I guess it says something like, maybe there's some point about the things you do in your youth don't have to be your whole life, etc., etc. All these kind of things. That's Clockwork Orange. Wonderfully written, though. Wonderfully written. Heavy subject matter. It's just a wonderful book. I highly recommend it for readers, though. Not so much for casuals. For casuals, I would just suggest watching the Kubrick movie. It really feels a lot like the Kubrick movie. It's one of the few times you say, the book isn't better than the movie. I wouldn't say also the movie's better than the book, but they sort of eyeing each other in a really nice way. All right. Ad time? These are my books. You can buy these if you want to help the channel. None of the ultra violence in my books. Not about it. But they're fun. They're fun enough, I guess. More sci-fi and fantasy style books. Give them a look. You can buy them. You can also get Kindle Unlimited and read them. I think either way is fine with me. You can also subscribe if you're inclined. Or you can just keep watching. All right. Let me go edit this bad boy. I will see all of you next week.